One of the last games that we'll see bless our TV screens over the course of week number 2 is a matchup where this time next season is actually going to be considered a conference game. And that is the San Diego State Aztecs coming off of a commanding 42-0 season opening win against Stony Brook. They will now travel for the very first time this season out to Pullman, Washington to take on the Washington State Cougars, who are also coming in with a 1-0 record in a game that will take place at 10:15 p.m. Eastern over on the CW network, in a game that we'll be trying to watch very closely if we're still physically able to keep our eyes open during the course of week number 2. And it's also a game as well that could really set the tone in terms of the 2026 pecking order within the confines of a rebuilt Pac-12, as both of these teams, as we mentioned, are going to be part of that same conference beginning next season. But as of right now, it is, of course, considered a non-conference game. Now, San Diego State might be falling a little bit under the radar because of the fact that they did play, I believe it was on a Thursday night, and they went up against Stony Brook, but they really had a commanding game, 42-0, which you're going to sit here and tell yourself blowing out an FCS team is not that big of a deal. And I hear you. But looking at the betting markets going into that particular game, San Diego State was only listed as a 19.5-point favorite. And they doubled that up with ease, amassing a staggering amount of offense, almost 500 yards of total offense on the day, dominating the time of possession. And also, for the very first time since before COVID was even a thing here in the US, San Diego State was also successful in terms of actually pitching a shutout. Now, if you take a look at what's happening on the other end with Washington State, yes, they did also win, and you can certainly argue that Idaho is a better team than Stony Brook. But even with that in mind, Washington State, under its brand new head coach, Jimmy Rogers, they looked a little shaky. I'm not going to lie to you. They looked a little bit shaky out here, man. As even though this is a head coach that led South Dakota State to an FCS national championship a couple of years ago, in his first year up in Pullman, Washington, I think it's clear that he's going to have his work cut out for him up here in Pullman. I truly do believe that. So with a team that's flying a little bit under the radar in San Diego State, and then Washington State just kind of stumbling their way into their very first FBS matchup, I do think that even though Washington State is going to be able to work with an underrated home field advantage, really a beautiful stadium out here in Pullman, Washington, I also can't help but think about San Diego State under Sean Lewis is playing with a ton of confidence right now. And I also can't help but think, based upon what we saw early on in that Stony Brook game, that Sean Lewis may legitimately have his best squad since arriving in San Diego, by way of briefly being the offensive coordinator for Colorado, and then even longer ago after that, after he led Kent State to respectability during his coaching tenure in the Akron area. Now, taking a look at what FanDuel and what our internal metrics are currently reporting as of right now for the San Diego State and Washington State matchup, we do expect this to be an extremely competitive game. Washington State, regardless of whether you take a look at our internal metrics or whether you're taking a look at our game line from FanDuel, it's supposed to be extremely close, right? You're looking at within a field goal in both cases, and it could certainly go in either direction. I truly do believe that. But just thinking about that confidence that San Diego State is bringing to the table as of right now, I don't think that this ends up being the same defensive-minded affair that Washington State plays in, but there's certainly going to be a little bit more defense and maybe what you would see in a typical college football game. I do, however, think the Aztecs pull it together. They get enough timely drives in the ball game that ultimately allows them to pull a slight upset off on the road. So in a little bit more of a defensive-minded affair than your average college football game, give me the Aztecs to walk into Pullman, Washington, and pull off a very, like a walk-off field goal type of win. Give me San Diego State winning by a final score of 24-21.